Story 1. The Man Who Followed Me. Sarah Martinez was 28 years old, working as a nurse in Phoenix, Arizona, when her life turned into a waking nightmare. It started on a seemingly normal Tuesday morning in March. Sarah had stopped at her usual coffee shop before her shift at the hospital, a routine she'd followed for over 2 years. She ordered her regular vanilla latte and found a quiet corner table to check her phone before work. That's when she first noticed him. A tall, thin man in his 40s, wearing a faded denim jacket and baseball cap, sitting 3 tables away. Nothing unusual about him, except for one thing. He was staring directly at her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. When their eyes met, he smiled and gave a small wave, like they were old friends. Sarah quickly looked away, gathered her things, and left for work, chalking it up to just another awkward social interaction. But the next morning, he was there again. Same table, same stare, same uncomfortable smile. This time, when Sarah got up to leave, she noticed he folded his newspaper and stood up too. Coincidence, she told herself, but something deep in her gut said otherwise. As she walked to her car in the parking garage, she could hear footsteps echoing behind her, matching her pace exactly. Sarah quickened her steps, and so did the footsteps. She reached her car, got in quickly, and locked the door. In her rearview mirror, she saw the man standing by the garage entrance, watching her drive away. That night, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. The following week, the pattern continued. Every morning the man was at the coffee shop. Every morning he followed her to the parking garage. But it was getting worse. Sarah noticed he had started taking photos of her with his phone, not even trying to hide it. When she changed her routine and went to a different coffee shop across town, somehow he was already there, sitting in the back corner with that same unsettling smile. How did he know where she would go? Sarah's hands trembled as she realized this stranger had been studying her, learning her habits, predicting her movements. Then came the notes. The first one was tucked under her car's windshield wiper after her shift at the hospital. In messy handwriting, it read, "I love watching you take care of people. You have such gentle hands. I can't wait to feel them." Sarah's blood ran cold as she looked around the parking garage. Empty. But she felt eyes on her watching from somewhere in the shadows. The next note appeared 2 days later, this time slipped under her apartment door. "You looked beautiful sleeping last night. The lavender sheets really bring out your skin tone." Sarah's apartment was on the 3rd floor. How could he see her sleeping? She immediately called the police. Officer Martinez, no relation, took Sarah's report with professional concern, but explained the harsh reality. Until the stalker made direct threats or committed a crime, there was little they could do. He suggested she document everything, change her routines, and consider a restraining order if she could identify the man. But how do you get a restraining order against someone whose name you don't even know? Sarah felt helpless and utterly alone. That night, she barely slept, jumping at every sound outside her window. The harassment escalated quickly after that. Sarah would find the man waiting outside her apartment building when she came home from work. He would follow her grocery shopping, always staying just far enough away to avoid direct confrontation, but close enough for her to know he was there. The notes became more frequent and more personal. He knew what she had eaten for dinner, what TV shows she watched, even what time she went to bed each night. One note contained a detailed description of her daily routine, accurate down to the minute. 7:15 a.m. First alarm, you hit snooze. 7:24 a.m. Second alarm, you get up and check your phone. 7:31 a.m. You brush your teeth for exactly 2 minutes. The list went on for an entire page. The breaking point came on a Friday night in April. Sarah was coming home from dinner with friends around 10 p.m. when she noticed her apartment door was slightly ajar. She knew she had locked it. She always double and triple checked after the stalking began. Heart pounding, she called 911 from the hallway and waited for police to arrive. When officers searched her apartment, they found evidence that someone had been inside for hours. Food was missing from her refrigerator. Her bed was unmade in a different way than she had left it. And most terrifying of all, there were dozens of photographs spread across her kitchen table. Pictures of her sleeping, showering, changing clothes, all taken from inside her own apartment. The stalker had been living in her space, watching her most private moments. The police dusted for fingerprints and found matches in the system. The man's name was David Coleman, a 43-year-old former security guard with a history of stalking and breaking and entering. He had been fired from multiple jobs for inappropriate behavior toward female co-workers and had served 2 years in prison for stalking a previous victim. Sarah learned that David had been watching her for over 6 months before she ever noticed him at the coffee shop. He had followed her home from the hospital one night, learned her routines, and had been systematically planning his invasion of her life. David was arrested at his apartment, where police found hundreds of photos of Sarah, detailed maps of her daily routes, and a journal filled with obsessive fantasies about their relationship. He had been breaking into her apartment regularly for weeks, sometimes sleeping in her spare bedroom while she was at work. The judge sentenced him to 8 years in prison for stalking, breaking and entering, and invasion of privacy. Sarah moved to a different state and changed her name. But even now, 3 years later, she still checks every lock twice and sleeps with a baseball bat beside her bed. Story 2. Stranger at My Window. 22-year-old college student Jessica Chen thought living in a ground-floor apartment would be convenient. No stairs to climb, easy access to the parking lot. She had no idea that convenience would nearly cost her life. Jessica was a senior at State University, studying late into the night for her psychology degree. Her apartment was in a quiet complex near campus, surrounded by tall oak trees that provided privacy and shade. Those same trees would soon become the perfect cover for a predator. It started with small things that Jessica dismissed as coincidence or paranoia. A shadow passing by her bedroom window at night, footsteps in the leaves outside when no one should be there, the feeling of being watched while she studied. Jessica lived alone and often had her blinds open to let in natural light. Her apartment faced a small courtyard area where residents sometimes walked their dogs or checked their mailboxes. She thought nothing of people passing by during the day, but the nighttime visits felt different. The first real incident occurred on a Tuesday night in September. Jessica was lying in bed around midnight, scrolling through her phone before sleep when she heard a soft tapping at her bedroom window. At first she thought it was a tree branch blown by the wind, but the tapping had a rhythm to it. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap, tap. She muted her phone and listened carefully. The tapping stopped for a moment, then resumed, more insistent this time. Jessica's heart began to race as she realized someone was deliberately knocking on her window. She crept quietly to the window and peered through the blinds. Standing less than 3 feet away, separated only by a thin pane of glass, was a man she had never seen before. He was middle-aged, probably in his 40s, with graying hair and a thin build. He was dressed in dark clothing and was standing perfectly still, staring directly at her window. When Jessica's movement caused the blinds to shift slightly, the man's head turned toward the motion, and he smiled. Even in the dim light, Jessica could see his teeth, yellow and crooked, as he pressed his face closer to the glass. Jessica immediately called 911, whispering into her phone as she hid in her bathroom. By the time police arrived 15 minutes later, the man was gone. Officers found clear footprints in the soft dirt beneath her window and evidence that someone had been standing there for an extended period. Cigarette butts, candy wrappers, and disturbing of all, what appeared to be a small folding chair. The stalker had been comfortable enough to sit and watch her for hours. The visits became nightly after that. Every night between midnight and 3 a.m., Jessica would hear the familiar tapping at her window. Sometimes he would just stand there silently for an hour or more. Other nights, he would walk around the entire perimeter of her apartment, testing windows and doors, trying to find an unlocked entry point. Jessica installed additional locks, bought blackout curtains, and even rearranged her furniture,
so her bed wasn't visible from the window. Nothing deterred him. The stalker began leaving gifts. Jessica would wake up in the morning to find items placed carefully on her windowsill: flowers, chocolates, handwritten poems professing his love for her. The poems were disturbing, filled with graphic descriptions of what he wanted to do with her, and references to how beautiful she looked while sleeping. One poem described in detail what she had worn to bed the previous night, what position she slept in, and how many times she had gotten up during the night. He was documenting her every movement, even through blackout curtains. Jessica's grades began to suffer as the nightly visits destroyed her sleep schedule. She was exhausted, paranoid, and couldn't concentrate on her studies. She tried staying at friends' apartments, but somehow the stalker always knew when she returned home. She would come back to find evidence of his presence: more gifts, more poems, and once, horrifyingly, what appeared to be an attempt to break in through her back door. The wooden frame was splintered and gouged, as if someone had been trying to pry it open with a crowbar. The situation reached a terrifying climax on Halloween night. Jessica had gone to a party with friends and returned home around 2 a.m., hoping the Halloween festivities would keep her stalker occupied elsewhere. As she pulled into her parking space, her headlights illuminated a chilling scene. The stalker was standing in her apartment's doorway, not outside but inside, as if he owned the place. He waved at her cheerfully, like a neighbor greeting a friend, then calmly walked out the front door and disappeared into the darkness. Jessica called 911 immediately and refused to enter her apartment until police arrived. When they searched the unit, they found evidence of an extended break-in. The stalker had been inside for hours, going through her personal belongings, lying on her bed, eating her food. In her bedroom, officers discovered a horrifying shrine: dozens of photos of Jessica that had been taken without her knowledge, arranged around candles and surrounded by the gifts she had never accepted. On her desk was a handwritten letter, 20 pages long, detailing the stalker's sexual fantasies and his plans to take her away from all this, so they could be together forever. The break-in provided police with DNA evidence and clear fingerprints. The stalker was identified as Robert Hayes, a 47-year-old maintenance worker who had previously been employed by Jessica's apartment complex. He had kept copies of master keys when he was fired for inappropriate behavior toward female residents. Robert had been stalking multiple women in the complex for over 2 years, but Jessica had become his primary obsession. Police found similar shrines in his apartment for 3 other women, along with detailed surveillance notes and hundreds of photographs taken without consent. Robert was sentenced to 12 years in prison for breaking and entering, stalking, and sexual harassment. Jessica transferred to a university in another state, and now lives in a high-security apartment building with 24-hour guards. She still can't sleep without checking every window and door multiple times, and the sound of tapping, any tapping, sends her into a panic attack. The experience changed her fundamentally, robbing her of the basic feeling of safety that most people take for granted. Story 3. Unseen footsteps. Maria Santos thought she was going crazy. For weeks, the 35-year-old graphic designer had been hearing footsteps in her house when no one else was there. Living alone in a 2-story colonial home she had recently inherited from her grandmother, Maria chalked up the sounds to the old house settling, pipes creaking, or her imagination working overtime from too much caffeine and too many late nights working on client projects. She had no idea that the footsteps were real, and they belonged to someone who had been living in her house for months. The sounds started small and easily dismissed: a creak from upstairs while she worked in her home office on the first floor, the soft sound of footsteps in the hallway late at night when she was watching television. Occasionally she would hear what sounded like a door closing somewhere in the house, but when she investigated, all the doors were exactly as she had left them. Maria began to wonder if grief over her grandmother's death was affecting her mental state more than she realized, but the sounds became more frequent and more distant. Maria would be in the kitchen making dinner when she would clearly hear someone walking around in the bedroom, directly above her. The footsteps would move from one side of the room to the other, pause, then continue. When she would go upstairs to investigate, the room would be empty, but something always felt off. Items would be slightly out of place. A book moved from one side of the nightstand to the other. The curtains opened when she remembered closing them. Her pillow indented as if someone had been lying on her bed. Maria started keeping a journal of the incidents, thinking that documenting them might help her figure out if there was a pattern. or if she was indeed losing her mind. The entries became increasingly disturbing. Tuesday, 3:47 p.m. Footsteps in attic. Lasted 10 minutes. Went to check. Found attic door open. I never go up there. Friday, 11:23 p.m. Heard shower running upstairs. I was downstairs the entire evening. Bathroom was wet when I checked. Sunday, 2:15 a.m. Woke up to footsteps in kitchen. Found refrigerator door open and food missing. The breaking point came when Maria installed motion-activated cameras around her house, hoping to either capture evidence of an intruder or prove to herself that her imagination was playing tricks on her. What the cameras revealed was more terrifying than anything she could have imagined. The footage showed a man living in her house, moving freely through her rooms when she was asleep or away at work. He was thin, probably in his 30s, with long dark hair and ragged clothing. He moved through her space with casual familiarity, as if he belonged. The most disturbing footage showed the man in Maria's bedroom while she slept, standing at the foot of her bed for hours just watching her. Other videos caught him eating her food, using her shower, and even lying on her couch watching her television. He had created a makeshift living space in her attic, complete with blankets, canned food, and what appeared to be a collection of Maria's personal items, photos, clothing, jewelry, that he had been stealing over time. Maria immediately called police, and officers arrived to search the house thoroughly. They found the attic space set up as a crude apartment, with evidence that someone had been living there for months. The man had created a sophisticated system of watching Maria without being detected. He had drilled small holes in the ceiling and walls that allowed him to observe her daily activities. He knew her schedule better than she did, moving freely through the house when she was predictably at work or asleep. The stalker had been accessing the house through a basement window that had been broken and carefully concealed from the outside. He would enter and exit when Maria was away, but had grown bolder over time, staying in the house even when she was home, hiding in closets and unused rooms. Police found journals in the attic space filled with detailed observations about Maria's habits, routines, and personal life. He had been documenting everything: what she ate, what she wore, who she talked to on the phone, even her moods and emotional state. The most chilling discovery was a detailed plan the stalker had written for taking the relationship to the next level. He had been preparing to reveal himself to Maria, convinced that months of secretly sharing her living space had created a bond between them. The plan included contingencies for different reactions Maria might have, including detailed methods for restraining her if she didn't respond positively to his presence. Police realized that Maria had unknowingly been living just days or weeks away from a violent confrontation. The stalker was identified through DNA evidence as Marcus Webb, a 31-year-old drifter with a history of breaking and entering and stalking charges in multiple states. He had been watching Maria's house for weeks before moving in, learning her routines and waiting for the perfect opportunity. Marcus had done this before. Police connected him to similar cases in 3 other states, where he had secretly lived in women's homes for extended periods. Marcus was arrested at a nearby homeless shelter and charged with breaking and entering, stalking, theft, and invasion of privacy. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison, but the psychological damage to Maria was permanent. She sold her grandmother's house immediately and moved to a small apartment in a building with 24-hour security. Even now, 2 years later, Maria sleeps with lights on and frequently checks closets and unused spaces, unable to shake the feeling that someone might be watching her from the shadows. These 3 stories remind us that horror doesn't always come from fiction. Sometimes the most terrifying experiences happen to real people in ordinary circumstances. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And remember, you're never as alone as you think you are. Someone could be watching, waiting, learning your routines and planning their next move. The question isn't whether predators exist, it's whether you'll recognize the signs before it's too late.